Man, looking at the opening zombie eating Kenneth's head sets a disturbing tone many games of that era had difficulty replicating. There were plenty of survival horror titles at the time that emanates shock, fear, terror, and horror, but none came as close to Resident Evil. It could be due to the well-formatted layout of the Spencer Mansion, each room holding secrets keeping the player on edge. Or maybe it is a clear inspiration from American cinema like John Carpenter's The Thing, incorporating disgusting elements of body horror into its creature design. Or the tight hallways and dynamic camera perspectives inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Whatever the reason may be, you might have a harder time finding individuals who are unfamiliar with the Resident Evil franchises than those who are. It comes as no surprise that Capcom ported the original entry to 4 other consoles, and that's why today we're going to be looking at the pros and cons with today's port versus port, a video series highlighting the differences and the similarities of the vanilla and port versions of a singular title. Resident Evil fans, you're going to be eating good today thanks to Capcom. We got a special giveaway right here for you. Zombies, outbreaks, and 8-foot-tall vampires. Win a free Steam code of Resident Evil Village courtesy of Capcom and rid Romania of any remnants of the supernatural. Click the GLEAM link below to find out how to enter. The genre of survival horror has always existed in the realm of video games, but struggled to find a solidifying format. Alone in the Dark was known as the grandfather of 3D survival horror, primarily focused on the story of a private investigator looking into the mysteries of a nearby haunted mansion and its origins. While it was a revolutionary title, it struggled with an archaic system of interactivity that can be complicated for most, and in combination with slow-paced combat does little to elevate any kind of tension. Clock Tower excelled in positioning players in a vulnerable state against an opposing unstoppable force. A lack of means to defend yourself requires you to find hiding spots, or tactics of diversion was a unique spin on the genre. A confusing map layout and poor point-and-click controls were some negatives that held the genre back in terms of any kind of evolution. Resident Evil is not only a phenomenal title due to rectifying problems that plagued the survival horror genre, it was inspired by pieces of pop culture that give it a unique signature. It is clear why Resident Evil 1 sold over 1 million units just in North America alone in 1996. Resident Evil not only stood out as a pioneer of survival horror, but built upon and expanded each of the faulty negatives that previously came from other titles. Exploring each room of the Spencer Mansion brought uncertainty and fear from what could be lying dormant. Notes were sprinkled throughout the mansion premises, fleshing out what happened to the former residents of the home. You were not just killing zombies. These were people who lived not too long ago, mindlessly feasting upon you for basic reasons of survival. Resident Evil is not a pretty game today, but in combination of great controls and visuals made it stand out from most titles of that generation. The success of Resident Evil pushed Capcom to release ports in different forms while fans waited for the inevitable sequel. In 1997, a year and a half after the original release, Capcom updated the franchise with Resident Evil Director's Cut. Brand new modes and features were added that help elevate the original title for veterans and newcomers alike. If you wanted to experience the original version, the standard mode has you covered. Enemy placements and items remain intact and are the same as the original 1996 release. But the newly added Arranged mode sets to give a brand new experience. Every single enemy and item has been completely rearranged to throw players off and bring a fresh new experience on a classic. I even noticed that new camera positions were added as well. The Statue Room with the hidden map provides a great example that showcases the old and new camera positions. The camera in Arranged mode is placed in the Velvet Curtain Room appearing as if someone is staring right at the player. The original places the camera at the top left in opposition. Director's Cut does a great job at providing players with a brand new experience of a familiar adventure. Small but welcome updates were also included, like a revised gun reskin that allows double the player's chance of zombie decapitation. A beginner mode was also implemented to help ease new players into the franchise. This was a great way to ease tension on players by providing double the amount that would be gathered when seeking ammo or lowering the HP on all enemies. I feel this mode can be perfect for speedrunners to test the limits of the game's engine mechanics and discover new ways to exploit your enemies. Unbeknownst to Capcom, some scenes of the opening FMV were cut and nowhere to be found. Cut were the scenes like Forrest's death, and the opening was still in black and white. It is a shame since this was advertised as the director's cut, which is supposed to be uncensored and easier to access, but mistakes do happen during game development all the time, so this is not anything to hold Capcom against at all. The third version of Resident Evil was introduced, called DualShock Edition.
Jill Valentine. Mary Burton.
And if that was not obvious, this implements the newly created Rumble feature thanks in part to Nintendo's pioneering. Analog controls were finally added, making it easier to navigate through the Spencer Mansion and not wear your thumb out due to the bony D-pad. Going into the main menu also gives you a surprising amount of control choices from A to D. You can even have button remappings of your choice, along with turning on and off vibration controls. The FMV cutscenes are exactly like previous editions, excluding one slight change to the music. Capcom created a symphonic soundtrack for Resident Evil, but is considered to be one of the worst soundtracks in existence to the point of being a meme. The FMV was always cheesy and has been accepted into the Resident Evil fandom for its campiness, but the music has not been accepted for some. It deflates the unsettling tone presented in the original. There are many ways to play Resident Evil PS1, but the definitive version will always be the DualShock due to the compilation of well-received features and containing the original experience. But there is more to be had, and Capcom did not disappoint with the Saturn version either. The Saturn version feels like a distant cousin of the PS1. It has similar features and aesthetics to the PS1 version, but with some revisions that make this port stand on its own. If you love the features of Arranged Mode, Beginner's Mode, and Auto-Aim, goodbye to those lovely features. Saturn's features draw parallel to the vanilla PS1. The PS1's release was in March of '96. Followed by the Saturn in August '97, but precedes the release of the director's cut. This makes sense as to why this version is as close to the vanilla as possible while maintaining the graphical architecture the Saturn was known for. The Saturn's weakness of properly rendering transparencies causes effects like gunshots or blood to have an interlaced appearance, a contrasting difference from the smoky effects. You can see how different the Saturn handles this effect compared to the PS1. Just because it uses the vanilla as a base should not make you count this port out, since it does bring exclusive features that no other version retains. The models appear to have a different look than the originals. Jill looks almost completely different from the vanilla, but I honestly prefer this look just a bit more. However, this is a subjective take. Which version of Jill do you feel looks the best? For starters, the FMV cutscenes are still in black and white, but have been uncensored. You can now find that STARS member Forrest picks up a gun with an attached hand, but we never see the bone or blood previously. This version brings that back, along with the extended scenes of his untimely death by zombie dogs. Several sections of the gameplay have also been uncensored. When a seemingly dead zombie attacks Jill on her heel, she always kicks the head like a soccer ball when it's disappearing. The Saturn version has a different trick, showing us both the head flying around in a bloody trail and staying in perpetual sight. It is a small change, but kind of fun to see it bounce around like that. I do wish Capcom added a dedicated map button, as the Saturn has plenty of buttons to dedicate it to, but it is a shame we need to go through the menu to do this every time. Saturn titles like Symphony of the Night took advantage of using a third button, so it would have been nice to add this here. The Saturn introduces the exclusive Battle Mode, pitting you against enemies in the Resident Evil franchise in a roguelike fashion. Think of it as a precursor to mercenary modes in Resident Evil 4, using the same concept but in curated areas. You begin in the mansion's basement save room, so feel free to take any weapon that suits your playstyle. After leaving the room, you are then teleported to random rooms requiring you to defeat every enemy to move on to the next level. The enemies also extend to bosses, having you defeat Yawn the Snake or Plant 42. I feel that compared to Arrange mode, this exclusive and necessary feature is a huge miss that was not included later. The Saturn strikes to be one of the most unique out of all the mentioned ports, and it's great to see that Capcom kept most of the original features intact. It is a shame that newer modes weren't included, but I think horror fans will find some solace in the Saturn. Unless you're a retro collector with a Windows 9X setup, chances are you have not played Resident Evil on PC. And while there's not any additional content that allows this version to stand on its own, it's a good attempt at bringing the classic to the PC market. For completion's sake, we'll be looking over how this game runs on the original 95 experience and reliving this on modern Windows operating systems. Covering the basics of Resident Evil PC, Capcom brought over the vanilla experience that mimics the PlayStation 1. What you are losing in this port is any form of arranged mode, the inclusion of the exclusive battle modes, and other previous versions. What you gain is uncensored content that has been brought over from the Saturn version. The main intro FMV for the first time in the series is presented in color, stripping it from its black and white presentation. While other versions have difficulty presenting these scenes uncensored, the PC version does not shy away from that area. You can easily see full death scenes of Joseph being mauled by the zombie dogs or mutilated body parts scattered throughout the battlefield. I always appreciate it when companies bring uncensored content in this fashion and applaud Capcom for doing so. Aside from this, you are getting everything that the PlayStation version contains, so if you like keyboard controls or would rather play this on the PC platform, this version brings a solid contender to the field. The PC's exclusive strength is uncensored content and colored FMVs, setting itself apart from others. To showcase how Resident Evil runs, I'll be using camera footage of my Windows 98 build complete with a Pentium 4 and original hardware. Opening the game presents an adorable auto-run launcher with lovely concept art pieces from the main characters like Chris Redfield or Rebecca Chambers. With your chosen character, the game boots into the wonderfully aged FMV in color with all uncensored content. Stepping into the mansion introduces the first of many problems from this port. Resident Evil is a CPU-sensitive port, with the frame rate tied to the CPU's speed. If you have a powerful processor, like my Pentium 4, chances are the game will run above intended frame rates, causing characters and animations to speed up. This may cause incompatibility or entire sections to freeze up without advancement. I cannot advance through the Jill campaign since it was frozen during the cutscene with Barry, so there was no way to test beyond this section.
Kenneth was killed too!
From here on out, it was Chris Redfield to the rescue and traverse the mansion throughout his campaign. While Resident Evil's heart beats with the cumbersome movement of a tank, the keyboard layout does not make traversing this any better. The function keys open up a menu to allow button remapping but are only limited to letter functions, shying away from any key modifiers. If you wanted to use, say, the spacebar for firing or the shift button for running, you cannot. I am personally not a fan of some aged Windows control layouts, and the possibilities are so finite with this port. To make matters worse, if you wanted to use a controller, that will come with some difficulty as well. Controllers of this era make primary use of parallel and serial ports, so Good luck trying to have an experience that mimics the PS1. But fortunately, this is where the impressive work of modders come in. Italian modder Gemini has painstakingly modified this Windows 95 port to run on Windows 10, dubbed Resident Evil Classic Rebirth. The mod not only surpasses and rectifies every problem in the Windows 95 version, but includes new amenities that solidify this as a credible PC port. The port opens with a configuration screen littered with modern amenities, as well as some to fix the overall experience. You have full resolution options, or to choose from different resolutions associated with 4:3. The full resolution takes advantage of your monitor, whether ultra-wide or 16:9, and properly scales it to its resolution. Gemini also added native 240p resolution that scales up to the screen of your monitor for retro enthusiasts who prefer sharper pixels. However, if you like modern upscaling techniques, he also added a texture filtering option to round out some of the models. Jill looks pretty funky with a rounded out face model, but I'm not going to criticize you if you prefer how she looks in this manner. I previously mentioned that button remapping on 95 is limited to non-modifier keys on the keyboard. This mod properly adds full keyboard remapping for those who love to use their keyboards, but also full Bluetooth and controller support. Whether you have an Xbox One S controller or the Switch Pro controller, the layout can feel as comfortable or better than on PlayStation platforms, depending on your preference. On top of these features, Gemini also added exclusive gameplay features such as a 180 turn, popularized by Resident Evil 3, and a convenient tactical reload, allowing for reloading at any desired time. The mod has not only changed the perception of the PC port as a whole, but goes well beyond introducing features not seen in any ports or versions before. If the nature of this port was not of that of the vanilla PS1, I would wholeheartedly recommend this version in a heartbeat due to its ease of use, accessibility, and other modern features any Resident Evil fan can appreciate. But then, there was the little handheld that could, and it does more than any of the listed ports today. The Nintendo DS's touch controls for interaction added a deeper layer of intuitive gameplay that modern titles struggle to achieve today. Graphic novel titles like Hotel Dusk replicated the ritual of holding it like a book, while other titles used the microphone to add a layer of touch. Resident Evil Deadly Silence might not have been the best example of a title that solidifies this agenda, but it does provide more than enough features for it to surpass its predecessors. Starting the game opens with the famous Chris Redfield screen and title. Your options range from the regular new and load, along with wireless and options. While my copy is in Japanese, you are provided with two different control layouts to suit your playstyle, both of which are pretty comfortable to use and adequate for most users. It would have been nice to have a nice novelty stylus control to navigate your character, but I can understand this might be an aged control layout. Chinoiro, or blood color, lets you change the blood color similar to the N64 version of Resident Evil 2. Mic no Kando, or mic sensitivity, controls how much wind is necessary to be used on the mic, making it easier or harder to navigate through microphone-based puzzles. New Game has two modes similar to the DualShock Edition, but heavily revamped. For those who want the classic vanilla experience, this version will provide that in spades. The native resolution of 256 by 192 makes playing Resident Evil a nearly identical visual experience to the PS1. The scaling on both screens looks wonderful, and the frame rate holds up beautifully when traversing the mansion. FMV cutscenes are played at a wonderful frame rate, but took some caveats to achieve this fidelity. The view of the FMV has been reduced to fit a smaller aspect ratio, most likely due to compressing the video file small enough to fit on a DS cartridge. The FMVs revert to censoring Joseph's death from the dogs, along with black and white picture. In an odd contrast, the inclusion of Kenneth's decapitated head was not censored and left in the final game. But why am I talking about classic mode when you want to learn about the new rebirth mode? The best way to describe rebirth is a randomizer. The mode rearranges items and enemies in different sections of the mansion, even more so than arrange mode on the PS1. You can find broken shotguns in save rooms, or chests littered throughout the mansion that requires solving puzzles to open them. The enemies have been buffed, with zombies having faster walking animations and even double the number of enemies in a room. The original Resident Evil provides a moderate level of tension, but the number of enemies in combination with the scattered items truly makes this a much harder but rewarding experience. Several game mechanics were also updated to keep in line with current Resident Evil titles. The 180 turn, popularized by Resident Evil 3, also makes its introduction here, so flipping against enemies and tackling them is simple to encounter. The biggest change is the inclusion of knife mode by default. Taking inspiration from Resident Evil 4, if you're low on ammo or need to defeat an enemy, the knife will be one of your best tools to use here. Pressing L brings up your knife and allows you to attack enemies without it taking up a slot in your inventory. The UI has been overhauled to take advantage of both screens of the Nintendo DS. Normal gameplay is played on the bottom screen, allowing you to navigate through the mansion using button controls. The top display will showcase the mansion's map, the amount of ammo you have left in your gun, and even how much health you currently have. Taking inspiration from Resident Evil 2 on the Dreamcast, the VMU displays your health in real time. The DS performs similarly, with the screen flashing yellow or red to indicate your condition. One of the few disappointing factors is how little this game uses the touchscreen, but this may be a positive to some. The game's primary use of touch controls is used during the new knife mode. When you're exploring the mansion, the game pauses and starts throwing zombies at you in a similar style to House of the Dead. Using your stylus, you can slash, swipe, or stab zombies to oblivion. This mode proves to be a nice novelty but slowly degrades to an annoyance, and it takes little to no effort to thwart zombies. This does bloat the gameplay and stops the flow of exploration, but this feels like a tacked on mode to market across for players wanting to purchase the game at the time. Little updates have also been included, like skipping door animations for those who just want to blaze through the game. While the animations were used to hide loading screens, it can be tedious to go through every time, so this is a welcome feature. Similarly to the PC mod of tactical reloading, you can reload at any given time. No need to go into the menu, as a simple reload is what does the trick. The DS proves that size does not matter. You can have a fantastic gaming experience that mimics the console, and Capcom proves to hold that true. But if you don't think so, what do you guys think? Which version of Resident Evil 1 appeals to you? For this reason, let us go through a classic port versus port comparison to see which version works best for you.
It was Bravo Team's helicopter. Nobody was in it. But strangely, most of the equipment was still there. However, we soon discovered why.
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
Stop it! Don't open that door!
But Chris is...
What is it? Maybe it's Chris.
How many ports was that? That was like 5, 6. It's an exuberant amount of Resident Evil ports that have been released, but it just goes to show you testament of how amazing this title is and the impact this game has had on the entire video game industry. Really has truly revolutionized survival horror as a whole, and now with the announcements of Resident Evil 4 and future titles, it's going to be really exciting to see what's going to be going on. So what do you guys think? What is your favorite version of Resident Evil 1? There's a lot to choose from. My personal favorite is the Sega Saturn. I am extremely biased for the Sega Saturn just because of having some of the features on that, but DualShock Edition, it's kind of the way to go for me. If I'm being pretty realistic because of all the features, arrange mode, and different things. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I want to take this time to give a special thank you to Capcom for providing codes for Resident Evil Village, and to you guys for not only watching but, you know, helping support the channel. And I decided to relaunch my Patreon again. I think it took a lot of time to really feel like I needed to do a Patreon, so I hope this is a good time and that it's another way that if you want to support the channel, you can do so. And finally, we also do have the Nexus store, courtesy of Capcom as well. So if you want to buy some Capcom games and also support the channel, all the links will be down below. There's a lot of new changes coming on. I hope you guys will love it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll see you very soon.